A fictional story. The morning sun cast long shadows across the marble floors of Eldoria Palace as Captain Marcus Thorne adjusted his crimson uniform for the final time. 25 years he had served the royal family through 3 kings and 2 queens, and never once had he questioned an order. Today would be different. The palace bustled with unusual energy. Servants whispered in corners, their voices carrying notes of uncertainty that Marcus had learned to recognize over his years of service. Queen Isabella, the beloved monarch who had ruled Eldoria for 15 years, lay dying in her chambers 3 floors above. The entire kingdom held its breath, waiting for news that everyone knew was coming but no one wanted to hear. Marcus walked through the grand hallway, his polished boots echoing against the stone. Portraits of past rulers watched him from their golden frames, their painted eyes seeming to follow his movement. He had memorized every face, every story, every triumph and tragedy that these walls had witnessed. The palace was more than his workplace. It was his home, his life, his purpose. "Captain Thorne," called a voice from behind him. Marcus turned to see Lady Cordelia, Queen Isabella's most trusted advisor, approaching with hurried steps. Her usually perfect appearance showed signs of strain, her gray hair slightly disheveled, her elegant dress wrinkled from what appeared to be a sleepless night. "My lady," Marcus replied, offering a respectful bow. "How is Her Majesty this morning?" Lady Cordelia's face tightened. "The same, I'm afraid. The doctors say it won't be long now." She paused, glancing around to ensure they weren't overheard. "There's something else, Captain. Something you need to know before the ceremony begins." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. The ceremony she referred to was the traditional changing of the crown, where all palace staff and guards would kneel before the new ruler as a symbol of their loyalty and service. It was a sacred tradition, unchanged for centuries. "What is it, my lady?" "Princess Valeria has made certain requests. Regarding the ceremony, she wishes to make changes to the traditional procedures." Lady Cordelia's voice dropped to almost a whisper. "She's demanded that all guards remove their ceremonial swords and place them at her feet as they kneel. She says it will demonstrate complete submission to her authority." Marcus's hand instinctively moved to the sword at his side. The ceremonial blade had been passed down through generations of palace guards. It belonged to his grandfather, who had saved King Frederick's life during the Great War. His father had carried it while protecting Queen Isabella during her coronation. Now it was his honor to bear, and he had planned to pass it to his own son when the time came. "Captain," Lady Cordelia continued, "I know this is unusual, but Princess Valeria will be our queen soon. We must prepare for changes." But Marcus knew there was more to this story than simple tradition. Princess Valeria had always been different from her mother. Where Queen Isabella was known for her kindness and wisdom, Valeria was calculating and cold. Rumors had circulated for months about her plans to restructure the palace guard, replacing longtime servants with people loyal only to her. This sword ceremony wasn't about respect, it was about power and humiliation. As Lady Cordelia walked away, Marcus continued his morning rounds through the palace. In the servants' quarters, he heard fragments of worried conversations. The kitchen staff spoke in hushed tones about new rules that were already being whispered about. The gardeners shared concerns about changes to the palace grounds. Everyone sensed that their world was about to shift dramatically. Marcus climbed the stairs to the guard tower, where he could see the entire palace grounds spread below him. The gardens that Queen Isabella loved so much bloomed with late autumn flowers. The courtyard where she had held festivals for the common people stretched out in perfect symmetrical patterns. Beyond the palace walls, he could see the capital city of Ethermore, where thousands of citizens waited for news about their beloved queen. His fellow guards joined him as the morning shift began. There was Thomas, a young guard whose eagerness reminded Marcus of himself decades ago. There was William, a veteran who had served even longer than Marcus and understood the weight of their responsibility. And there was James, whose family had protected the royal family for 4 generations. "The princess has called for an early assembly," Thomas announced as he arrived. "All guards are to gather in the throne room within the hour." Marcus exchanged glances with William. They both knew what this meant. The ceremony would happen today, perhaps within hours of Queen Isabella's passing. There would be no time for grief, no time for proper mourning rituals. Princess Valeria was moving quickly to establish her authority. As they prepared to leave the tower, Marcus took one last look at the kingdom he had sworn to protect. The sun was climbing higher now, burning away the morning mist that clung to the distant mountains. Somewhere in those mountains lived the common people who looked to the palace for protection and guidance. They trusted that their guards would defend not just the royal family, but the values and traditions that made Eldoria great. Marcus touched his sword again, feeling the worn leather of the grip beneath his fingers. His grandfather had told him stories about the weight of honor, about moments when a person must choose between following orders and following their conscience. He had never imagined he would face such a moment himself. The bells of the palace began to toll, their deep bronze voices carrying across the grounds. It was the signal that all guards knew well. The queen's condition had worsened. Soon, very soon, Princess Valeria would become Queen Valeria, and everything would change. Marcus straightened his shoulders and began the walk back to the throne room. Whatever happened in the coming hours, he would face it with the same courage that his family had shown for generations. He would honor his oath to protect the kingdom, even if it meant standing against the very person he was sworn to serve. The palace fell silent around him as he walked, as if the ancient stones themselves were holding their breath, waiting to see what choice he would make when the moment of truth arrived. A fictional story, the throne room of Eldoria Palace had never felt so cold. Despite the dozens of people gathered within its walls, an uncomfortable silence filled the vast space. Marcus stood with his fellow guards in perfectly straight lines, their red uniforms creating a sea of crimson against the white marble floor. Above them, stained glass windows cast colorful patterns that danced across the ancient stone walls. Princess Valeria entered through the massive oak doors with deliberate, measured steps. She wore a black dress that seemed to absorb the light around her, making her pale skin appear almost ghostly. Her dark hair was pulled back severely, and her green eyes surveyed the room with the calculating gaze of someone who saw people as pieces on a chessboard, rather than human beings with feelings and histories. Behind her walked Lord Reginald, a thin man with sharp features who had recently become her closest advisor. Many in the palace whispered that he had too much influence over the princess, filling her head with ideas about absolute power and the need to control every aspect of the kingdom. His presence always made Marcus uncomfortable, though he couldn't quite explain why. Guards of Eldoria, Princess Valeria's voice rang out across the throne room, clear and commanding. Today marks a new chapter in our kingdom's history. As your future queen, I expect complete loyalty and obedience from each of you. Marcus felt his jaw tighten. There was something in her tone that reminded him of threats rather than royal proclamations. Beside him, he noticed William's hands clenching into fists, though the older guard kept his expression carefully neutral. The traditions of this palace have served us well, the princess continued, but traditions must evolve with the times. Today's ceremony will demonstrate your commitment to the new order that begins with my reign. She gestured to Lord Reginald, who stepped forward carrying a large velvet cushion. Upon it lay an ornate golden crown, different from the simple silver circlet that Queen Isabella had always worn. This crown was heavy with jewels and precious metals, designed to intimidate rather than inspire. Each guard will approach the throne, Princess Valeria announced. You will kneel before me, remove your ceremonial sword and place it at my feet as a symbol of your complete submission to my authority. Only then will you be permitted to continue serving in my palace. A murmur ran through the assembled guards like a whisper of wind through autumn leaves. Marcus could feel the tension radiating from his companions. These swords weren't just weapons. They were family heirlooms, symbols of honor passed down through generations. To place them on the floor like discarded tools felt like a betrayal of everything they represented. Thomas, the young guard standing to Marcus's left, shifted nervously. His sword had belonged to his uncle, who had died protecting the palace during a rebellion 20 years ago. William's blade carried engravings from his great-grandfather's military service. Each weapon told a story of sacrifice, courage, and dedication to the royal family. Let us begin, Princess Valeria said, settling onto the throne with an air of satisfaction. Guards will approach in order of rank, starting with the newest members of our service. Marcus watched as Thomas stepped forward, his young face pale but determined. The boy had joined the palace guard only 6 months ago, full of dreams about serving his kingdom and protecting the innocent. Now he walked toward the throne like a man approaching his own execution. Thomas reached the base of the throne and dropped to one knee. His hands trembled slightly as he unfastened his sword belt and held the weapon above his head. For a moment he hesitated, and Marcus could see the internal struggle playing out across his features. Then with visible reluctance, Thomas placed the sword on the marble floor at Princess Valeria's feet. "Very good," the princess said with a cold smile. "You may return to your position." One by one, the younger guards followed Thomas's example. Each approached the throne, knelt, and surrendered their ceremonial weapons. Some moved quickly, eager to get the humiliating ritual over with. Others took their time, clearly struggling with what they were being asked to do. But all of them complied. Marcus watched the growing pile of swords at the princess's feet and felt something breaking inside his chest. These weren't just weapons being discarded. They were symbols of everything he had spent his life defending. Honor, tradition, respect for the past, and hope for the future were being trampled beneath the feet of someone who saw power as her right rather than her responsibility. As the ceremony continued, Marcus noticed something else troubling. Lord Reginald was taking notes on a small piece of parchment, marking down the names of guards who hesitated or showed reluctance. It was clear that this wasn't just about submission. It was about identifying potential threats to Princess Valeria's authority. The line of guards grew shorter as more men surrendered their swords. Soon it would be Marcus's turn as captain to kneel before this woman, who seemed to understand nothing about true leadership. He thought about Queen Isabella, lying in her bed 3 floors above, probably unaware that her life's work was being undone in the very room where she had held court for 15 years. Marcus remembered the day Queen Isabella had promoted him to captain. She had spoken to him about duty, about the difference between serving a person and serving an ideal. A true guard, she had said, protects not just the crown but what the crown represents. Sometimes that means making difficult choices. William stepped forward when his name was called. The veteran guard moved slowly, his weathered face showing every one of his 60 years. His sword had seen more battles and protected more lives than any other weapon in the room. As he knelt before Princess Valeria, Marcus could see tears forming in the old man's eyes. William unfastened his sword belt with shaking hands. The weapon meant everything to him. It was his legacy, his pride, his connection to decades of faithful service. But as he held it above his head, ready to place it at the princess's feet, something unexpected happened. Princess Valeria leaned forward in her throne, her green eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "Tell me, old man," she said in a voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "Do you truly believe I am worthy of your sword?" It was a cruel question, designed to humiliate William further by forcing him to lie or face punishment for honesty. Marcus felt anger burning in his chest as he watched his old friend struggle with the impossible choice. William looked up at the princess, his hand still holding his sword above his head. For a long moment, the throne room was completely silent except for the distant tolling of bells that announced Queen Isabella's weakening condition. "Your Highness," William said finally, his voice steady despite his tears, "I have served this kingdom for 42 years. I have seen true nobility and false nobility. I have witnessed courage and cowardice. And I have learned that a crown does not make someone worthy. Their actions do." The silence that followed felt like the pause before thunder. Princess Valeria's face darkened with rage, and Lord Reginald stepped closer to the throne, his hand moving toward the dagger at his belt. But William wasn't finished. Still kneeling, still holding his sword above his head, he looked directly into Princess Valeria's eyes and spoke words that would change everything. "I place this sword at your feet because I must," he said. "But my loyalty belongs to something greater than any single person. It belongs to the kingdom of Eldoria and the values that make us strong." The sword clattered against the marble floor, joining the growing pile of surrendered weapons. But something had shifted in the throne room. The other guards stood straighter, their faces showing new determination. William had found a way to comply with the order while still maintaining his dignity and principles. As William returned to his position, Marcus realized that his moment of choice was approaching. Soon he would hear his name called, and he would have to decide whether to follow William's example or take a different path. Entirely, a fictional story, Captain Marcus. Thorn, Princess Valeria's voice cut through the throne room like a blade through silk. The moment Marcus had been dreading had finally arrived. Every eye in the room turned toward him as he stepped forward. His fellow guards watched with expressions of sympathy and concern. knowing the impossible position their captain faced. The servants who had gathered along the walls held their breath. Even Lord Reginald looked up from his notes, sensing that something significant was about to happen. Marcus walked with measured steps across the marble floor, his boots echoing in the vast chamber. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if the weight of 25 years of service was pressing down upon his shoulders. The pile of surrendered swords at the princess's feet seemed to grow larger as he approached, a monument to broken traditions and humiliated honor. As he reached the base of the throne, Marcus looked up at Princess Valeria. She sat with perfect posture, her black dress making her appear like a shadow against the ornate golden throne. Her green eyes studied him with the intensity of a hunter examining prey, waiting to see if he would break like all the others. "Kneel," she commanded, her voice carrying across the silent room. Marcus remained standing. The silence stretched between them like a taut rope ready to snap. Behind him, he could hear the sharp intake of breath from his fellow guards. Even Lord Reginald stopped writing, his pen frozen above the parchment. "I said kneel," Princess Valeria repeated, her voice rising with anger. Marcus looked past her to the portraits hanging on the wall behind the throne. Kings and queens of Eldoria gazed down at him from their painted frames, their faces reflecting the wisdom and dignity that had made their kingdom great. Among them hung a recent portrait of Queen Isabella, her kind eyes seeming to offer him strength for what he was about to do. "Your Highness," Marcus said, his voice clear and steady, "I have served this palace and this kingdom faithfully for 25 years. I have knelt before Queen Isabella countless times, not because she demanded it, but because she earned it through her wisdom, compassion, and dedication to our people." A gasp echoed through the throne room. No one had ever spoken to Princess Valeria with such directness, especially not in front of so many witnesses. Lord Reginald stepped closer to the throne, his hand moving to his weapon, but Princess Valeria held up a hand to stop him. "You dare lecture me about earning respect?" she hissed. "I am your future queen." Marcus nodded slowly. "You are indeed my future queen, Your Highness, and because of that I believe you deserve honesty, rather than empty gestures of submission." He gestured toward the pile of swords at her feet. "These weapons represent generations of service and sacrifice. They are symbols of honor, not tools of humiliation. To place them on the ground like discarded objects diminishes not just the guards who carried them, but the institution of the monarchy itself." The color drained from Princess Valeria's face, replaced by a flush of rage. "How dare you question my judgment? How dare you stand there and refuse my order?" Marcus remained calm, though his heart pounded in his chest. "I am not questioning your authority, Your Highness. I am questioning the wisdom of this particular command. A true leader inspires loyalty through respect, not fear." Behind him, Marcus could hear murmurs spreading through the assembled crowd. The servants whispered among themselves, and even some of the guards who had already surrendered their swords were nodding in agreement with their captain's words. Princess Valeria stood from her throne, her entire body trembling with fury. "Guard Captain Marcus Thorne, you are hereby relieved of your duties. You will surrender your sword and your position immediately." Marcus reached down and slowly drew his ceremonial sword from its sheath. The blade caught the light streaming through the stained glass windows, casting rainbow reflections across the marble floor. He held the weapon up, examining it as if seeing it for the first time. "This sword belonged to my grandfather," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the room. "He carried it while protecting King Frederick during the Great War. My father bore it while defending Queen Isabella during her coronation. I have carried it with pride for 15 years, hoping one day to pass it to my son so he might serve with the same honor." He turned the blade so everyone could see the engravings along its edge, symbols of courage, loyalty, and service that had been carved there decades ago. "But I will not place this sword at anyone's feet," Marcus continued. "Not because I am disloyal or rebellious, but because true loyalty means standing up for what is right even when it is difficult." Princess Valeria's face contorted with rage. "Guards, arrest this traitor! Strip him of his weapons and throw him in the dungeons." But something remarkable happened. The guards who had surrendered their swords looked at each other uncertainly. No one moved to arrest their captain. Even Thomas, the youngest among them, stood straighter and took a step closer to Marcus, as if offering his support. Lord Reginald drew his own sword, its steel singing as it left its sheath. If the guards won't act, I will deal with this insubordination myself. But before he could move toward Marcus, William stepped forward from his position in the line. Despite having surrendered his own weapon, the old guard placed himself between Marcus and Lord Reginald. "You'll have to go through me first," William said quietly. Then James stepped forward. Then another guard. Then another. Within moments, a wall of guards stood between Marcus and Princess Valeria's advisor, all of them choosing to protect their captain rather than follow her orders. Princess Valeria looked around the throne room with growing panic. Her ceremony of submission had turned into something entirely different, a demonstration of the loyalty and respect that Marcus had earned through years of honorable service. The very guards she had sought to humiliate were now standing together in defiance of her authority. "This is treason," she screamed. "All of you! This is treason against the crown." Marcus sheathed his sword and stepped toward the throne, though he remained standing rather than kneeling. "Your Highness, this is not treason. This is loyalty to something greater than any individual ruler. We serve the kingdom of Eldoria, its people, and its values. We protect what makes us strong as a nation." He gestured toward the assembled guards. "These men have families in the villages beyond these walls. They have children who look up to them as examples of honor and courage. If we teach them that loyalty means blind obedience to unjust commands, what kind of kingdom will we leave for the next generation?" The truth of his words seemed to resonate through the throne room. Even some of the servants were nodding in agreement, their faces showing admiration for the captain's courage. Princess Valeria sank back onto her throne, her rage giving way to something that looked almost like fear. For the first time in her life, someone had stood up to her, and others had followed that example. The absolute power she had expected to wield was cracking before her eyes. "You will all pay for this," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "When I am queen, you will all pay." But even as she spoke the threat, everyone in the room could see that something fundamental had changed. Marcus had shown that it was possible to serve the crown while still maintaining dignity and principles. He had demonstrated that true leadership comes not from demanding submission, but from earning respect through honorable actions. The bells of the palace continued to toll in the distance, marking Queen Isabella's final hours. But in the throne room, a different kind of transition was taking place. One that would determine not just who would rule Eldoria, but how they would rule and what kind of kingdom they would lead. A fictional story. The throne room remained frozen in tension, like a painting capturing a moment that would change everything. Marcus stood surrounded by his fellow guards, their unified stance speaking louder than any words could. Princess Valeria gripped the arms of her throne so tightly that her knuckles had turned white, while Lord Reginald looked around the room as if searching for allies who were nowhere to be found. Suddenly, the massive oak doors burst open with a thunderous crash that echoed through the chamber. Lady Cordelia rushed in, her usual composed demeanor replaced by obvious distress. Her gray hair had escaped its careful arrangement, and tears streamed down her weathered cheeks. "Your Highness," she called out, her voice breaking. "Queen Isabella. She's gone." The words hit the room like a physical blow. Several servants gasped and covered their mouths in shock. Guards who had maintained perfect military posture throughout the confrontation now bowed their heads in grief. Even Marcus felt his throat tighten with emotion as the reality of the moment sank in. Queen Isabella, the beloved monarch who had ruled Eldoria with wisdom and compassion for 15 years, was dead. The woman who had promoted Marcus to captain, who had treated the palace staff like family, who had opened her doors to common citizens seeking justice, she was gone forever. Princess Valeria stood slowly from her throne, and for a moment her mask of cold authority slipped. Marcus saw something almost human in her expression, a flash of genuine sorrow that reminded him that she was, after all, a daughter who had just lost her mother. "The Queen is dead," Lady Cordelia announced formally, though her voice trembled. "Long live Queen Valeria." The traditional words hung in the air like a challenge. According to ancient law, Princess Valeria was now Queen Valeria, ruler of Eldoria with all the powers and responsibilities that came with the crown. But the events of the past hour had shown that power without respect was hollow indeed. Marcus stepped forward, and the room fell silent once again. Everyone watched as he approached the throne, wondering what the captain would do now that Valeria was officially his queen. "Your Majesty," Marcus said, his voice carrying the formal tone of official address. Please accept my deepest condolences on the loss of your mother. Queen Isabella was a great ruler and a good woman. She will be deeply missed by all who knew her. Queen Valeria studied his face, searching for any sign of mockery or insincerity. But Marcus's grief was genuine, and she could see it in his eyes. For a moment, the anger between them seemed to fade, replaced by shared sorrow. "Thank you, Captain," she replied quietly. She spoke highly of you. Often. The admission surprised everyone in the room, including Valeria herself. She seemed startled that she had revealed something so personal in front of so many people. But the words had already been spoken, and they changed the atmosphere in subtle but important ways. Marcus nodded respectfully. "Queen Isabella taught me much about duty and honor. I hope to continue serving this kingdom in the spirit she would have wanted." "And what spirit is that, Captain?" Queen Valeria asked, her voice regaining some of its earlier edge. Marcus chose his words carefully. "Service to the people, protection of the innocent, and loyalty to the ideals that make Eldoria great. Queen Isabella once told me that a crown is not a symbol of power over others, but a symbol of responsibility for others." Lord Reginald stepped closer to the throne, clearly uncomfortable with the direction the conversation was taking. "Your Majesty, we should proceed with securing your authority. These guards have shown dangerous insubordination that cannot go unpunished." But Queen Valeria held up her hand to silence him, her attention focused entirely on Marcus. "You stood against me today, Captain. You refused a direct order from your future queen. How do you explain such behavior?" Marcus met her gaze steadily. "Your Majesty, I have sworn an oath to protect this kingdom and serve its ruler faithfully. But that oath also requires me to speak truth to power when I believe it is necessary. I refused your order not out of disrespect, but out of a deeper respect for what the crown represents." "And what does the crown represent to you?" The question seemed to come from genuine curiosity rather than anger. Marcus glanced around the throne room, taking in the portraits of past rulers, the intricate stonework that had taken generations to complete, and the faces of people who had dedicated their lives to serving something greater than themselves. "The crown represents the hopes and dreams of every person in this kingdom," Marcus said. "It represents justice for the oppressed, protection for the weak, and leadership for those who need guidance. It represents the promise that those in power will use that power wisely and compassionately." Queen Valeria was quiet for a long moment, absorbing his words. Around them, the throne room remained silent except for the distant sound of bells tolling the news of Queen Isabella's death throughout the capital city. "Captain Thorne," the Queen said finally, "you have shown remarkable courage today. Foolish courage, perhaps, but courage nonetheless." She paused, seeming to weigh her next words carefully. "My mother clearly saw something in you that earned her trust. I am beginning to understand what that might be." Lord Reginald moved closer to the throne, his face showing alarm at the Queen's conciliatory tone. "Your Majesty, surely you're not considering rewarding this insubordination?" The other guards followed his example. "If there are no consequences—" "There will be consequences," Queen Valeria interrupted firmly. "But they may not be the consequences you expect." She stood and walked to the pile of surrendered swords at the base of her throne. Kneeling down, she picked up William's weapon, the one that had seen 42 years of faithful service. She examined the blade carefully, noting the engravings and the careful maintenance that spoke of a soldier's pride in his equipment. "These swords tell stories," she said, holding William's weapon up for everyone to see. "Stories of sacrifice, courage, and dedication. Stories that deserve respect, not humiliation." One by one, she began picking up the other surrendered weapons, examining each with growing understanding. Thomas's sword, inherited from his fallen uncle. James's blade, passed down through 4 generations of service. Each weapon represented a family's commitment to the kingdom. When she had gathered all the swords, Queen Valeria turned back to face the assembled guards. "I was wrong to ask you to place these at my feet like discarded tools. These weapons and the men who carry them deserve better." She walked to William first, extending his sword back to him with both hands. "I return this to you with my apologies and my gratitude for your years of service." William's eyes filled with tears as he accepted his weapon back. "Thank you, Your Majesty." One by one, Queen Valeria returned each sword to its owner, speaking words of appreciation and respect to each guard. The ceremony that had begun as an exercise in humiliation was transformed into something entirely different, a ritual of mutual respect and understanding. When she reached Marcus, she paused. "Captain Thorne, your sword never left your side, but your courage today has taught me something important about leadership. True authority comes not from demanding submission, but from earning loyalty through honorable actions." Marcus bowed his head respectfully. "Your Majesty, I serve at your pleasure and at the pleasure of the kingdom." "Then continue serving, Captain. Help me become the queen that Eldoria deserves." As the guards reattached their ceremonial swords and resumed their positions, Marcus felt something shift in the throne room. The confrontation that had begun with threats and anger had ended with understanding and mutual respect. Queen Valeria had shown that she was capable of growth and wisdom, qualities that would be essential in the challenging days ahead. But as Marcus looked toward Lord Reginald, he saw that not everyone was pleased with this turn of events. The advisor's face showed barely concealed fury, and Marcus knew that today's victory might have come at a steep price. Some battles end conflicts, while others simply mark the beginning of larger wars. A fictional story 3 days had passed since Queen Isabella's funeral, and the palace felt different. The black banners still hung from every window, and servants moved with the hushed reverence that follows great loss. But beneath the surface of mourning, Marcus could sense currents of change flowing through the ancient halls like underground rivers seeking new channels. Marcus walked through the palace gardens in the early morning light, following the same path he had taken for years but seeing it with new eyes. The roses that Queen Isabella had loved were beginning to fade with the approach of winter. Their petals scattered across the gravel pathways like memories of better times. Captain Thorne. The voice belonged to Sir Edmund, an elderly nobleman who had served as Queen Isabella's chief counselor for over a decade. His weathered face showed the strain of recent events, but his eyes held a spark of something that looked like hope. "Sir Edmund," Marcus replied, offering a respectful bow. "How may I serve you?" The old counselor glanced around to ensure they were alone among the roses. "I wanted to thank you for what you did in the throne room. It took tremendous courage to stand up to to Queen Valeria as you did." Marcus felt uncomfortable with the praise. "I simply did what I thought was right, sir. Nothing more." "Nothing more?" Sir Edmund chuckled softly. "Captain, do you realize what you accomplished? You showed our new queen that true leadership requires more than just demanding obedience. In 3 days, I've seen more positive changes in her behavior than I witnessed in 3 years of Princess Valeria's preparation for the throne." It was true. Since the ceremony, Queen Valeria had made several decisions that surprised everyone. She had canceled the planned restructuring of the palace guard, allowing the veteran soldiers to keep their positions. She had reduced several harsh taxes that Princess Valeria had planned to implement. Most significantly, she had begun holding daily audiences where common citizens could bring their concerns directly to her attention. "The Queen has shown wisdom in her early decisions," Marcus agreed carefully. "But I sense there are those who are not pleased with these changes." Sir Edmund's expression darkened. "You're thinking of Lord Reginald, aren't you?" "Yes, he's been vocal about his displeasure with recent developments. He believed he would have significant influence over Queen Valeria's rule. Your actions in the throne room disrupted his plans considerably." Marcus had noticed Reginald's growing hostility over the past few days. The advisor had been holding private meetings with various nobles and palace officials, speaking in hushed tones about the need for stronger authority and stricter discipline. There were rumors that he was building support for his own vision of how the kingdom should be ruled. "Sir Edmund," Marcus said quietly, "is there something specific you wanted to discuss with me?" The old counselor looked around once more, then stepped closer. "There are things happening, Captain. Dangerous things. Lord Reginald has been corresponding with certain foreign powers, kingdoms that would benefit from instability in Eldoria. He's also been meeting with nobles who were loyal to Queen Isabella's brother." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. Queen Isabella's brother, Prince Roderick, had been exiled 15 years ago after attempting to overthrow her government. He had fled to the neighboring kingdom of Drakmore, where he had been plotting his return ever since. "Are you saying that Lord Reginald is planning treason?" "I'm saying that Lord Reginald is planning something, and it's not in the best interests of Queen Valeria or the kingdom. He's been spreading rumors about your dangerous influence over the queen. He claims that you're filling her head with ideas about weakness and compromise that will make Eldoria vulnerable to its enemies." Before Marcus could respond, they heard footsteps approaching on the gravel path. Both men turned to see Thomas hurrying toward them, his young face flushed with excitement and concern. "Captain Thorne, sir," Thomas called out as he reached them. "Queen Valeria requests your immediate presence in the private council chamber. She says it's urgent." Marcus exchanged glances with Sir Edmund, both men wondering what new crisis might be developing. "Thank you, Thomas. I'll go immediately." As Marcus walked quickly through the palace corridors toward the council chamber, his mind raced with possibilities. The private council chamber was where Queen Isabella had made her most important decisions, away from the formal protocols of the throne room. For Queen Valeria to summon him there suggested something serious was happening. He found the Queen standing at a large window that overlooked the capital city of Ethermore. She was still dressed in the black mourning clothes she had worn since her mother's death, but something in her posture suggested determination rather than grief. "Your Majesty," Marcus said, bowing as he entered the chamber. "You wish to see me?" Queen Valeria turned from the window, and Marcus was struck by how much she had changed in just 3 days. The cold, calculating expression he had grown accustomed to seeing had been replaced by something more thoughtful and mature. She looked like someone who was beginning to understand the true weight of leadership. "Captain Thorne, I need your advice on a matter of great importance. Please sit." She gestured to a chair at the polished oak table where Queen Isabella had held countless meetings with her most trusted advisors. Marcus sat carefully, wondering what could have prompted such an unusual request. In all his years of service, he had never been asked to sit in the presence of royalty. "I've been reviewing my mother's private papers," Queen Valeria began, "and I've discovered some disturbing information. It appears that there are forces working against the stability of our kingdom, forces that may have been planning for this transition long before my mother's death." She placed a leather portfolio on the table between them. These documents detail correspondence between certain nobles and Prince Roderick. They also include financial records showing large sums of money being moved between Eldoria and Drakmore in ways that suggest preparation for some kind of military action. Marcus leaned forward, studying the documents she had spread across the table. The evidence was damning, clear proof that a conspiracy had been developing for months, possibly years. "Your Majesty, these documents suggest that your uncle has been planning an invasion, but he would need allies within Eldoria to succeed. Do you have any idea who might be supporting him?" Queen Valeria's jaw tightened. "I have suspicions, Captain. Strong suspicions, but I need someone I can trust to help me investigate further, someone who has proven their loyalty beyond question." The implication was clear. She was asking Marcus to help her uncover the conspiracy, to serve not just as captain of the guard but as her personal investigator, in a matter that could determine the fate of the kingdom. "Captain," she continued, 3 days ago you stood up to me when you believed I was wrong. Today I'm asking you to stand with me against enemies who would destroy everything my mother built. Will you help me?" Marcus looked into her eyes and saw not the petulant princess who had demanded submission, but a young queen who was finally beginning to understand the true nature of leadership. She was asking for his help not because she commanded it, but because she trusted him to do what was right for the kingdom. "Your Majesty," Marcus replied, "I serve at your pleasure and at the pleasure of Eldoria. If you believe I can help protect this kingdom, then I am entirely at your service." Queen Valeria smiled, the first genuine smile Marcus had ever seen from her. "Thank you, Captain, but I must warn you, this investigation may put you in considerable danger. If my suspicions are correct, the conspiracy reaches into the highest levels of the palace. We may not know who we can trust." Marcus thought about Sir Edmund's warnings about Lord Reginald, about the advisors' private meetings and foreign correspondence. A picture was beginning to form in his mind, and it was more dangerous than he had imagined. "Your Majesty, where would you like me to begin?" Queen Valeria gathered the documents back into the portfolio. "Tonight there will be a gathering of nobles in Lord Reginald's chambers. He's called it a strategy session for dealing with the kingdom's security concerns. I want you to find a way to observe this meeting without being detected. I need to know exactly what they're planning." As Marcus prepared to leave the council chamber, Queen Valeria called out to him one final time. "Captain, be very careful. If they discover what you're doing, they won't hesitate to eliminate you as a threat. And I cannot afford to lose someone I've come to trust." Walking back through the palace corridors, Marcus realized that his moment of defiance in the throne room had done more than save his dignity and that of his fellow guards. It had apparently earned him the trust of his queen and thrust him into the center of a conspiracy that threatened the very survival of Eldoria. The real test of his courage was just beginning, a fictional story. The palace corridors were darker than usual as Marcus made his way through the shadows toward Lord Reginald's chambers. Most of the torches had been extinguished for the night, leaving only every third one burning to provide minimal light for essential palace functions. This worked to Marcus's advantage as he moved silently through passages he had walked thousands of times during his years of service. Marcus had spent the afternoon carefully planning his approach. Lord Reginald's chambers were located in the east wing of the palace, in a section that housed the private quarters of high-ranking advisors and visiting dignitaries. The rooms were designed for privacy, with thick stone walls that would muffle conversation. But Marcus knew from his security rounds that there was a servants' passage running behind the main chambers, originally built to allow staff to service the rooms without disturbing important guests. As he approached the entrance to the servants' passage, Marcus encountered his first challenge. A guard stood at the intersection of two corridors, someone Marcus didn't recognize from the regular palace staff. The man wore the uniform of the royal guard, but something about his posture and alertness suggested he wasn't simply performing routine duties. Marcus pressed himself against the wall and observed the guard for several minutes. The man's attention was focused on the approaches to Lord Reginald's chambers, and he checked his pocket watch frequently, as if waiting for a specific time. This wasn't a regular security patrol. This was someone specifically posted to watch for unwanted visitors. Moving carefully, Marcus backtracked through the palace and found an alternative route that took him through the old wine cellars beneath the east wing. The cellars connected to the servants' passages through a narrow stairway that few people remembered existed. Marcus had discovered it years ago during a security inspection, and had always made mental notes of such hidden routes in case they were ever needed for emergency evacuations. The stairs were steep and covered with dust, suggesting they hadn't been used in years. Marcus climbed carefully, testing each step to ensure it wouldn't creak and betray his presence. At the top, he found himself in the servants' passage he had been seeking, with Lord Reginald's chambers just on the other side of the wall. Voices were already audible through the stone, though they were muffled enough that Marcus had to press his ear against the wall to make out individual words. He recognized Lord Reginald's sharp voice immediately, but there were others present, at least 4 or 5 men, based on the different tones he could distinguish. "Cannot allow this to continue," Lord Reginald was saying. "The Queen's recent behavior shows dangerous signs of weakness. If we don't act soon, she'll undo everything we've worked toward, but she is still the rightful queen," came another voice that Marcus recognized as belonging to Lord Gareth, a nobleman who controlled significant lands in the northern provinces. Any action against her would technically be treason. Lord Reginald's laugh was cold and bitter. "Treason? Lord Gareth, we're not plotting against the crown, we're trying to save it. Queen Valeria has shown that she lacks the strength necessary to rule effectively. She's been influenced by misguided advisors who fill her head with ideas about compassion and compromise. Such weakness will make Eldoria vulnerable to its enemies. What exactly are you proposing?" This voice was unfamiliar to Marcus, speaking with a slight accent that suggested the speaker was not from Eldoria. "Prince Roderick has assembled a significant force in Drakmore," Lord Reginald replied. "With proper coordination, we can ensure that his return to Eldoria appears to be a liberation rather than an invasion. The people will welcome him as a strong leader who can restore order and security." Marcus felt his blood run cold. The conspiracy was worse than Queen Valeria had suspected. They weren't just planning to undermine her authority. They were actively working with Prince Roderick to overthrow her government entirely. "And what of Captain Thorne?" asked Lord Gareth. "His influence over the Queen has become problematic. She clearly trusts his judgment more than ours." "Captain Thorne will be dealt with," Lord Reginald said dismissively. "He's already proven himself to be dangerously insubordinate. It won't be difficult to arrange charges against him that will justify his removal and imprisonment. Once he's out of the way, the Queen will be more receptive to proper guidance." Marcus pressed closer to the wall, straining to hear every word. The casual way they discussed his elimination sent chills down his spine, but he forced himself to focus on gathering information, rather than worrying about personal danger. "When does Prince Roderick plan to move?" the foreign voice asked. "Within the fortnight," Lord Reginald replied. "The Harvest Festival provides perfect cover. Half the kingdom's forces will be scattered throughout the provinces for the celebrations, and the capital will be filled with visitors from across the realm. In the confusion, a small, well-organized force could seize control of the palace before anyone realizes what's happening. And you're certain we can count on support from within the palace?" "Absolutely. I've been cultivating allies for months. Key positions in the guard, the household staff, even some members of the noble council. When the time comes, Queen Valeria will find herself isolated and defenseless." Marcus heard the sound of chairs scraping against the floor, suggesting the meeting was beginning to break up. He needed to get away before anyone discovered his presence. But the information he had gathered was so crucial that he forced himself to listen for a few more moments. "Remember," Lord Reginald said in closing, "absolute secrecy is essential. If word of our plans reaches the wrong ears, everything we've worked for will be lost. Prince Roderick is counting on us to ensure his return is swift and decisive." "What about the foreign support you mentioned?" Lord Gareth asked. "The Kingdom of Drakmore has agreed to provide additional troops if needed," the unfamiliar voice replied. "They're as eager as we are to see strong leadership restored to Eldoria. Weak neighbors make for unstable borders." Marcus had heard enough. Moving as quietly as possible, he began making his way back through the servants' passage toward the wine cellars. Behind him, he could hear the conspirators beginning to leave Lord Reginald's chambers, their voices fading as they dispersed to their own quarters. The return journey through the palace seemed to take forever. Every shadow could hide an enemy. Every sound could signal discovery. Marcus's mind raced with the implications of what he had learned. The conspiracy was far more advanced than anyone had suspected, with foreign involvement and support from within the palace itself. When he finally reached his own quarters, Marcus sat on his simple bed and tried to process everything he had heard. Prince Roderick would attack during the Harvest Festival less than 2 weeks away. Lord Reginald had allies throughout the palace, making it impossible to know who could be trusted. And they were planning to eliminate Marcus himself as soon as they could arrange suitable charges. But perhaps most concerning was the realization that Queen Valeria was in immediate personal danger. If the conspirators were willing to commit treason and invite foreign invasion, they wouldn't hesitate to harm or kill her if she became an obstacle to their plans. Marcus knew he had to warn the Queen immediately, but he also knew that approaching her directly might put both of them at risk. If Lord Reginald suspected that his meeting had been compromised, he might accelerate his timeline or take desperate action to silence potential witnesses. As dawn began to break over the palace, Marcus made his decision. He would request a private audience with Queen Valeria under the pretense of reporting on routine security matters. Once alone with her, he would reveal everything he had discovered and help her develop a plan to counter the conspiracy. But time was running short. In less than 2 weeks, Prince Roderick would march on Eldoria with an army at his back, and traitors opening the palace gates from within. The kingdom's survival would depend on whether a young queen and a loyal captain could outmaneuver enemies who had been planning their moves for months. The real battle for Eldoria was about to begin, and Marcus knew that his moment of courage in the throne room had been merely the opening move in a much larger and more dangerous game. Everything he had spent his life defending was now at stake, and the choices he made in the coming days would determine whether the kingdom would survive or fall to those who valued power over principle. As he prepared to seek his audience with Queen Valeria, Marcus touched the sword at his side, his grandfather's blade that had protected kings and queens for generations. Soon it might be called upon to defend not just the crown, but the very soul of Eldoria itself, a fictional story queen. Valeria listened to Marcus's report in complete silence, her face growing paler with each detail he revealed about the conspiracy. They met in the palace library, surrounded by centuries of accumulated wisdom. As the morning sun streamed through tall windows that overlooked the kingdom her ancestors had built and protected. "Prince Roderick will attack during the Harvest Festival," she said finally, her voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "That gives us 10 days to prepare." Marcus nodded grimly. "Your Majesty, the conspiracy reaches deep into the palace. We can't be certain who we can trust among the staff or even the noble council." Queen Valeria stood and walked to one of the tall windows, looking out at the capital city where her people went about their morning routines, unaware that their kingdom balanced on the edge of civil war. "Captain Thorne," she said without turning around, "I want to ask you something, and I need you to answer with complete honesty." "Of course, Your Majesty. Do you believe I can be the queen this kingdom needs? Not the princess who demanded you place your sword at my feet, but the woman I am becoming?" Marcus considered the question carefully. Over the past week, he had watched Queen Valeria transform from someone who demanded respect into someone who earned it. Her decisions had shown wisdom, her conversations with advisors had demonstrated thoughtfulness, and her concern for her people had proven genuine. "Your Majesty," Marcus replied, "I believe you can be one of the greatest queens in Eldoria's history. You have your mother's wisdom and your own strength. But more importantly, you have something that many rulers lack, the ability to learn from your mistakes and grow from them." Queen Valeria turned back to face him, and Marcus was surprised to see tears in her eyes. "When I demanded that ceremony with the swords, I was trying to prove that I was strong enough to rule. I thought strength meant making people fear me. You showed me that real strength means making people believe in you." She walked back to the table where Marcus had spread out the documents he had gathered during his investigation. "Now we must use that strength to save our kingdom. Do you have a plan?" Marcus had been thinking about this throughout the night. "Your Majesty, Lord Reginald expects to control events through secrecy and surprise. If we can turn those advantages against him, we might be able to defeat the conspiracy before Prince Roderick's army even reaches our borders." "How?" "We let them think their plan is working perfectly, right up until the moment we spring our own trap. But it will require us to take significant risks, and there's no guarantee of success." Queen Valeria straightened her shoulders, and Marcus saw in her posture the same determination that had made her mother such an effective ruler. "Tell me what you need." Over the next hour, they developed their strategy. Marcus would continue his investigation, but more openly, allowing Lord Reginald to believe he was gathering evidence for the charges they planned to bring against him. Meanwhile, Queen Valeria would use her royal authority to quietly position loyal forces throughout the kingdom. "The key is Sir Edmund," Marcus explained. "He's maintained correspondence with loyal nobles throughout the realm. If we can get word to them without alerting the conspirators, we can have significant reinforcements in position before Prince Roderick's attack. And within the palace, we'll need to identify which guards and staff members we can trust absolutely. Not many, just enough to secure the critical areas when the time comes." Queen Valeria made her decision quickly. "Do it. Coordinate with Sir Edmund, identify our allies, and prepare for whatever action becomes necessary. I'll handle the political aspects and ensure we have legal authority for whatever steps we need to take." The next 9 days passed in a blur of careful preparation and mounting tension. Marcus worked with William and Thomas to quietly identify guards whose loyalty was beyond question. Sir Edmund used his network of old friends and allies to spread word to nobles in distant provinces, calling them to the capital for an emergency council session that would actually serve to have loyal forces in position. Queen Valeria played her part perfectly, acting as though she remained unaware of the conspiracy, while gradually positioning her most trusted advisors in key positions. She also used her royal authority to arrange for additional security during the Harvest Festival, ostensibly to protect the many visitors but actually to have more loyal troops available when needed. Lord Reginald, convinced that his plans were proceeding smoothly, began making the final preparations for Prince Roderick's arrival. The foreign agent Marcus had heard at the meeting was spotted near the city gates, apparently surveying the best routes for attacking forces to enter the capital. On the morning of the Harvest Festival, Marcus received word that Prince Roderick's army had been spotted just beyond the kingdom's borders. The moment of truth was approaching rapidly. "They'll move tonight," Marcus reported to Queen Valeria as they met one final time in the library. During the festival celebrations, when the city is full of noise and distraction. "Are you ready, Captain?" Marcus nodded. "Thomas is positioned near the main gates with a dozen loyal guards. William has secured the armory. Sir Edmund's allies control the approaches to the palace. We're as ready as we can be." As darkness fell and the Harvest Festival celebrations began throughout the capital, Marcus took his position in the shadows near Lord Reginald's chambers. Everything depended on precise timing. They had to wait until the conspirators had committed themselves to action, before revealing that their plot had been discovered. Shortly after midnight, Marcus saw the signal he had been waiting for, a lamp in Lord Reginald's window, visible to observers outside the palace walls. Within minutes he could hear the sound of many men moving through the corridors, heading toward strategic positions throughout the palace. Marcus moved quickly to Queen Valeria's chambers, where she waited with a small group of her most trusted advisors. "It's beginning, Your Majesty. They're moving into position now. Then it's time for us to act as well." What followed was a carefully choreographed operation that would have made Queen Isabella proud. While the conspirators moved to secure what they thought were the key areas of the palace, Marcus and his loyal guards were already in position at the truly critical points. When Lord Reginald's men tried to seize the armory, they found William waiting with superior numbers. When they moved to open the gates for Prince Roderick's forces, Thomas was there to stop them. The most crucial moment came when Lord Reginald himself, accompanied by several armed supporters, burst into Queen Valeria's chambers expecting to find her defenseless and alone. Instead, he found her seated calmly at her desk, with Marcus and a dozen loyal guards surrounding her. "Lord Reginald," Queen Valeria said with perfect composure, "you're under arrest for treason against the crown of Eldoria." The advisor's face went white as he realized their careful plans had been completely anticipated. "How did you know?" "I learned to listen to the right advisors," the Queen replied, glancing meaningfully at Marcus. "And I learned that true loyalty isn't demanded, it's earned through honorable actions." The aftermath was swift and decisive. Prince Roderick's army, finding the gates closed and the palace defenses fully prepared, was forced to retreat without achieving any of their objectives. The foreign agents were captured and expelled from the kingdom. The nobles who had supported the conspiracy were arrested and faced trial for treason. Most importantly, Queen Valeria's handling of the crisis established her authority beyond any doubt. The same nobles who had questioned her strength now spoke admiringly of her wisdom and courage. The common people, learning how she had protected the kingdom from invasion, embraced her as their rightful ruler. 3 months later, Marcus stood in the throne room during Queen Valeria's formal coronation ceremony. She had chosen to hold a new ceremony, she explained, because she wanted it to reflect the kind of ruler she had become, rather than the kind she had once thought she needed to be. When it came time for the traditional oath of loyalty from the palace guard, Queen Valeria made an announcement that surprised everyone present. "The guards of Eldoria have already proven their loyalty beyond any ceremony or ritual," she declared. "They serve not because they are commanded to, but because they choose to defend something greater than any individual ruler. They protect the values and principles that make our kingdom strong." Marcus stepped forward, not to kneel or surrender his sword, but to speak on behalf of all the guards present. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the throne room, "we pledge our service not just to the crown, but to the wisdom, justice, and compassion that the crown represents. We serve the kingdom of Eldoria and the queen who has shown herself worthy of that service." The coronation ended, not with submission and humiliation, but with mutual respect and shared commitment to the ideals that would guide Eldoria into a new era of prosperity and strength. As the celebration continued around them, Queen Valeria approached Marcus privately. "Captain Thorne, I want to thank you for the courage you showed that day in the throne room. If you hadn't stood up to me, I might never have learned the difference between demanding loyalty and earning it." Marcus bowed respectfully. "Your Majesty, you honored me by choosing to listen and learn. That's the mark of a truly great ruler." Queen Valeria smiled, the same genuine smile he had seen when she first asked for his help with the conspiracy. "I have a feeling, Captain, that the kingdom of Eldoria is going to face many challenges in the years ahead. I hope I can continue to count on your honesty and courage when difficult decisions need to be made." "Always, Your Majesty, always." As Marcus returned to his duties, he reflected on how much had changed since that morning, when he had first heard about the sword ceremony. His moment of defiance had not only saved his own dignity and that of his fellow guards, it had helped shape a young princess into a wise queen and saved the kingdom from civil war. The ceremonial sword at his side, passed down through generations of loyal service, would continue to protect Eldoria. But now it would do so in service to a ruler who understood that true strength comes not from the power to command, but from the wisdom to lead with honor, compassion, and respect for those who serve alongside you. The palace that had once echoed with threats and demands now rang with the sounds of a kingdom united behind a queen, who had learned that the greatest victories come not from conquering others, but from conquering oneself.